Hello, this is your host, Liz Lawless, for the Author Adventure. And my partner, Russ John's having a little technical issues today. He's in Phoenix with air conditioning out. But we're going to go ahead because this is live and this is live streaming, and we just go no matter what. So Jay Stephen's here. That's the most important thing. He's our guest today. But this is episode 47. So we're very excited. Jay Stephen was our very first episode 2, I think, on the Author Adventure. And so we're following up now, though, because he's got a great new book. It's his recipe book and his business books. We're going to talk about those a little bit. But that's why I was excited to have him on, especially now because this Christmas in July, a lot of people are shopping right now for their Christmas presents. And this is going to be a great book. So you're going to want this recipe book. We'll have the show notes. In the show notes, we'll have the links to the book, so you'll be able to find it there. We're hoping that our buddy Russ is going to be able to pop it up on the screen here, but if for some reason he doesn't, you'll always be able to go back and find that in the show notes. So, Jay Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Liz. Happy to be here.
All right. So you've not only you've moved, you've traveled all over. You've traveled all over the country and all over Florida, but you finally got in your place. So we're excited about that. But yeah, originally I think we talked about your veggie books a little bit, and we also talked about your discovery book, your DISC book, where you work with corporations and stuff to do personality and behavior and to help people get along better. But obviously you are a chef, an author, an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur. And so today we really wanted to focus on your recipe book. So tell me a little bit about how that came about, our listeners. How all chefs want to have a cookbook, but not you.
Well, I didn't really, for years, I didn't want to have a cookbook because I was kind of like, as you know, Liv, I traveled around the world and I would take people with me and we would go out to different restaurants that I would find off the beaten path. I would never do the tourist traps.
Right. Uh-huh.
And we would find dishes. And what I would do with my fellow travelers, we would decide what was the best dish that we had on that trip. And then I would work with that chef. Usually chefs will work with other chefs, and I would work with them to learn the recipe, and then I would bring it back to my bistro in Dallas.
Right.
And that's kind of where it started. I started years ago doing this, traveling all around the world. Initially, I was traveling to find the ingredients for my family's crumb cake, the recipe.
Right.
That's what's my travels. And
and that's the first book. So the first book is
that's my first book, which is interesting because it talks about I knew my family recipe was over 400 years old, and I said, I wonder where did they source their ingredients?
All right, where did they get it?
Yeah, and I wanted to be true to the original recipe, and that's what got me traveling around the world and learning about all these different ingredients. Even as a chef, it's funny, as a chef, you say, okay, I'm going to make this, and I need cinnamon, and I need this, and I need that. And when I started traveling and learning about all these things, I found that cinnamon isn't cinnamon. There's chocolate isn't chocolate, and on and on and on, and tea isn't tea. And so my travels on my first book were all about finding out about all these different ingredients. And I do, as you know, Liv, I do talk to people about how to use the right ingredients that will really make a difference in a dish. Right. And that's what my first book is about. Uh-huh. Leading up to that, I opened my bistro in a little suburb of Dallas, Texas. Uh-huh. And that's where I was introducing a lot of my dishes. And this became a fun thing for me because with traveling and looking for the different ingredients, I also obviously traveled and tried all these different dishes. I would meet a chef and I'd say, I'm a chef in the United States. And they'd go, oh, come back in the kitchen. Let me show you how we do this. And it became this great thing. And I had all these great recipes. And I said, what will I do with these recipes? Right. And some of the dishes I introduced to my bistro, but so many dishes, I just couldn't have hundreds of dishes in a bistro. And so I had this great backlog, if you will, of all these wonderful recipes from around the world. Mm-hmm. And so many people that visited my bistro or that read my book said, we'd love for you to do a recipe book. And I always hesitated doing that because there's tons of recipe books out there.
Right. There's a cookbook on every shelf, but that's why, because everybody.
I didn't want to be another one of those. Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
and I didn't want to be one of those recipe books, right?
Right.
So I
Or another
resisted it.
cookbook. So it's really not. It's really different. It's not your normal cookbook for sure. So that was the first thing. I mean, I know you didn't want to be just another cookbook on the shelf, but people that cook love to collect recipe books and cookbooks and things like that. So I think it's really exciting. So your second book, let's just mention that real quick, is bringing fine dining to small town America. Basically, it's it was the quest for the best. It was building the bistro, finding the location, all the hoops you had to jump through if you're going to be in business, especially in the restaurant business or any kind of small business. But
I was amazed how many things you have to go through to start a small business. Absolutely flabbergasted me. And that's why I said I need to write this book to show people the things you encounter trying to just get off the ground.
just to get open. Yeah, for sure. So that was the thing. And now the third book, really that's a part of this nonfiction series, Request for the Best, that J. Stephen has, is the recipe book. And it's called what? My World on a Plate. Did I get that right? Okay. So hopefully we may get a copy of that. We might roll up here in a minute with Russ, but it may not because, like we said, his air conditioned out, and that's why he's not on here with us today asking some questions. But tell us a little bit about. Yeah, I'm very sure. Yeah. So
you asked about the book, and as you know, because you know me, we know each other for years. I just like with my bistro and just like with my trips, I didn't want it to be another trip taking people around like a tourist. Okay. Right. Well, with my book, I didn't want the standard recipe book, and I wanted it to be different. It's funny. My wife always says, she laughs when someone is trying to sell me something and they'll say, oh, well, you need to do this. Everyone's doing it. She said, they don't know that they just love it. The moment they said that, you're not ever going to do it that way. And that's really what happened with my recipe book. I didn't want it to just be a book of different recipes. There's thousands of books out there for recipes. So what I did a lot of different things. I picked all the best recipes from, whether it be from appetizers to breakfast, to sandwiches, to dinners, to desserts. I picked all what I felt were the best recipes from around the world. And at the top of every recipe, it says what country it came from. And it is absolutely true to the way they make it in that country.
Right. So there's Spain and there's France and there's the Cuba. I mean, it's just, all over the world. Yeah.
All over the world. England, every continent that I visited, there is dishes from there. And I made it so that you really had a good mix. It wasn't just from one area, right? And the other thing I did was I was really true to the recipe. So, I had a real clear picture, because I'm a very visual person. So I had a clear picture of the finished dish, which I think is important because you want to know how it should come out.
Right. How's it supposed to look?
You might think it's really terrible, but it came out the way it's supposed to, and that's okay.
Right. It looks like it's supposed to.
But also what I did, which most books don't do, in each recipe, I gave a little section of chef's secrets. And it was little things that, hey, if you do this, this will change this. And you don't get those in recipes. If you handle it this way instead of this way, it'll change the way it comes out. Little hints like that. And also one of the interesting things I thought I did is I gave exactly where I sourced all these unique ingredients. And no recipe book does that I know of. So they can see the recipe and they'd say, here's this special cinnamon, let's say, as an example. And here's where you can get it. You can get it wherever, but this is where I get it.
Right. But if you want the real deal,
Correct. Right. If you want the real deal, we've talked about cinnamon. That's always a great example that in the United States, they have the worst cinnamon in the world. And everybody goes out and just buys cinnamon and they don't know. But if you travel around the world and you find the great cinnamon, you're like, oh my God, this is so different. And it absolutely changes the dish.
Yeah, how things
having the right ingredients changes the dish. So in each one of my recipes, I tell them, here's the key ingredients to this recipe, and here's why This recipe makes this difference. And here's where you can locate that recipe. So that's kind of unique. I have never seen that in a book. And I knew as someone, chefs have a hard time writing recipes because it's in their mind. It's, everybody knows. You splash of this, you splash of that. Well, everybody doesn't know. So I really I brought it down to the common lowest denominator. So someone who has never even cooked can read it and say, it's a great step by step by step.
Yeah, I can do this.
Yeah, and that was really important to me, that anybody could do it.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to do from a chef's point of view, because
Yeah, and you think, well, we all do. We all think everybody knows what we know, but they don't. Right. They really don't.
Like you don't know. And one of the things I did in my book, I would write out a recipe, and then I would pull one of my guests in my bistro and say, read this. Do you understand it? Could you do it? And you'd be surprised how many times I had to rewrite it. Because, they just say,
how did you get from this step to this step? Oh, I forgot. Yeah, there's that extra step, or that I just automatically do that step. Yeah.
And so, and I'm like, well, everybody knows you. Well, no, everybody doesn't know that. So that worked out really well for me. And I have to thank all my guests in my bistro, because I probably bothered the hell out of them all the time. They asked me, try this, does this make sense, and whatnot. But, most of them were like, we love the idea. If you can make a recipe book, we'll buy it. And that was, they'd always been on me about doing a recipe book.
Yeah, so that did it.
So that was one of the really important things for me to do. The other thing, I explain where the dishes come from and how they came into being. So it's kind of a little bit of a short history of each dish, too.
Yeah, a history lesson as well as a cultural lesson too, because like you say, each country is different. Each country has kind of their own favorites. And anybody that travels or anybody that loves food, we know what those favorite things are, except for, what is it? The UK, they're the only ones that don't have a great dish.
And you know the story about the UK.
You can find great dishes in Italy. You can find great dishes in France and Germany.
You can find great dishes in Great Britain, but they're not British dishes.
Right.
They're Indonesia, they're Italian, or they're French, or whatever. But
Indian,
I don't know if I ever told you the story, but I had a lady come into my bistro and she said, "You're famous for bringing great dishes from every country, and I don't see one great dish from Great Britain. I'm from Great Britain." I went, "That's funny, because I couldn't find one either."
Right.
All their dishes are pub food. They're not.
Right.
And one of the things I need to make clear in my recipe book, they're really interesting dishes, but they're not highbrow dishes, if you will. They're not beef Wellingtons, that you're going to like. This looks great, but I'll never make this.
Right.
The dishes I have in there are dishes that the common man in Peru makes for their family. The person in Buenos Aires makes, for their family. I wanted to really have a good mix so that if you were having guests, you could do a highbrow. There's dishes in there like that. But you also could do things like sandwiches and these great little appetizers.
Right, and salads and soups and
salads, there's breads and on and on and on. And they're all easy things that somebody can do. They're not these giant things that you have to be to follow. It's funny.
Take you weeks to work on it.
I won't mention the name of a couple of people who are very famous for their recipes, but it's really funny because even I, as a chef, when you read the recipes, you say, "I'm not doing that." Obviously, she must have a lot of time on her hands, because I don't have the time to do that.
Right. Yeah.
So that was one of the other things that guided me too. I didn't want to make it insurmountable, if you will.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
That was
sure.
Key.
Yeah, so it is. It has the photos are great. It has great photos. Like J. Stephen talked about, it has the story, it has the recipe, it has the ingredients and where and how you can get those ingredients. And so it really is kind of a different thing. And you can always go to the index and find that too, but it's separated in those categories that we've been talking about, like you say, entrees or desserts or salads and appetizers, breads, different things. And so it really is an interesting and unique way to, I think, present recipes to people and for people. And so great gift for yourself, but a great gift for other people too. So if you've got somebody that's a chef that, that thinks they're a cook and they love to cook and they love to entertain, then this is going to be a great book and a great gift for them. So no matter who that is that you've got in your sphere of influence, you've got somebody that's the cook and that's that loves food. They're the foodie and they want to go to try new things all the time. This is a great gift for them. So books available at Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, Apple, all across any online platform and at retailers near you. But you also can go to jstevensgarden.com. I'm going to spell that JSTEPHENS Garden, GARDEN.com, jstevensgarden.com. You also can find his other books there, as well as his Happy Veggie books, which is his line of children's books that we're going to talk to here in just a minute. So about in just a minute. But let's see, what is your...
Find my books on my website at sadler.media.
Oh, okay.
It's just SADLER.media.
Okay, and that's got everything, right? Because the other one's more specific for the children's books.
Everything.
Yeah.
J.
Okay.
Stephen Sadler has mostly my children's books.
Right.
By the way, I just want to add one other thing that I forgot about, Liz, is that one of the biggest things in my recipe book, I did a lot of sauces, gravies, toppings, frostings, and whatnot, which is just unheard of. I mean, there must be more there than that alone can make a dish fantastic.
Fantastic.
And that was one of the things I spent a lot of time on, because that's the difference between an okay dish and a great dish, is what the accoutrements, what sauces you do with it, what you make. So a lot of time on that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that is a great tip. We did not talk about that. So if you're there, if you're listening and you're watching this, no matter when you're watching, if you're watching live or you're watching on the replay, you want to go check this out. You want to go, it's J Stephen Sadler. So that's J. I'm spelling this because we also have a podcast. This gets pulled down, and so maybe somebody's not seeing your name on the screen there, but J Stephen Sadler, J space STEPHEN Sadler, SADLER. So you can find him at Sadler Media, sadler.media, or you can find him on, like we say, all of the online book platforms and in your local retail outlets. So go look for that. Go look for his Quest for the Best series. That's the first two books. His book about his crumb cake and traveling the world to find the ingredients. The second book, Fine Dining, bringing fine dining to small town America. That one's available as well. That's got a blue cover on it. So if you're looking for that, those are his business books. And then he has also his DISC, which is his personality behavior programming that he does. In addition, so you do a lot of speaking to groups and to schools and women's groups and church groups, corporate groups, whatever that might be. And so what are a couple of the topics that you talk about when you go out and speak to people, Jay?
Well, there's three main topics, I guess, that I really cover. One is healthy eating for kids, and I do a really fun, we laugh, we have a great time. The kids love it because, do a seminar for kids. Are you kidding me?
Right.
You've seen my seminars for the kids. It's healthy eating, and it ties in a lot with the books I do, because each one of the kids' books are geared towards children, and they not only are healthy eating, but they're also moral to the story. And so we do a lot of funny looking fruit, funny looking vegetables, and we talk about how you can make these great dishes, like kids are like, eggplant, ugh. And then I show you how you can make eggplant brownies, and they taste them and they're like, oh, I could eat those.
Right. That tastes great. Yeah, give me some more of those brownies.
So we show them different dishes that they can do with healthy vegetables and make a great dish. I mean, we show popsicles they can make. Right.
Spinach popsicles. Yeah, like you say, if you can't get your kids to eat spinach, you want to make J. Stephen spinach popsicles. And his book is called Sammy Spinach. And we've got Chucky carrot, Bubba broccoli, Kalinda cauliflower, Paulina potato, Tanya tomato, and Eddie the eggplant that we were just talking about. And the last one, the most recent one, is Sydney string bean. So,
right. And the key for those books, well, I'll get into the books in a minute. Let me finish when you asked me about speaking. So I speak to a lot of kids. I go to a lot of schools. Okay. And that's where I speak to the kids. The second thing I do is I speak to anyone who is interested in cooking, not necessarily chefs, but in cooking,
Right.
home cooks and whatnot. And I explain to them, I show them why the right ingredients makes the giant difference. And we talk about all these different things, where I found this ingredient and why it's different and what it does and why the ingredient they're using today is not what they want to use. And people come away from that with like, wow, I just didn't know. Yeah. It was cinnamon.
Right. I never knew. Yeah.
And then you show them and it's like a light went on and they all want to go home and now get the writing right. And I tell them, you can do the same dish you're doing now, but when you change to the right ingredients, it changes the dish completely. And people are like, how is your dish different? I constantly get people in my bistro that say, I make the same thing you do with my recipe and it doesn't taste the same.
Right.
Well, it doesn't because you're using the same ingredients, but the wrong ingredients.
Right. You're not using the right butter or the right milk or the right cream or the right,
So I do a lot of those. Right. Yeah, right. All those things are important in going into making a dish. And so I do a lot of those.
Yeah. And I really like the fact too that it's not only the right ingredients in a recipe make all the difference, but the right ingredients in life for success make all the difference too. And you're able to express those additional skills and knowledge and wisdom that people need, just to do well, and whether it's relationships, whether it's business, whatever that happens to be. And so that's kind of an overflowing thing that's a little extra that somebody gets when they have you come and speak to their group, because you have experienced multiple businesses. You have been an entrepreneur. You do deal with the public. You dealt with the public for years on a regular basis and with communication and television and media and marketing. And so that's a really key thing to help people be the best that they can be, whether it's in the kitchen or just anytime. So.
Well, and that actually leads to the last thing that I do a lot of speaking on, and that is my DISC program, my discovery program, which is all about personalities, identifying your personality, and then identifying how you identify other people's personality so that you can then mesh with them. And I do that for personal groups, but I do a lot for businesses.
Right.
You have a sales group that says, well, how do I know the client on the other end of the table, what is really important to him? And once they learn how to identify personality types, they can say, well, this is what's important to me, but I realize his personality type, he don't care about that. He cares about this part of my product, so I need to talk about that. So I do a lot of sales seminars, and I do a lot of business seminars where they want their teams to work together. A great example, I did a seminar in Orlando for a company, and the owner of the company said, I have several crews, and some of my crews knock out the jobs. They're done way early, but they always get all kinds of problems. And then I have some crews that never hit their timeline, but I never have any problems. And I showed him why I identified the personality types and said, that's why this team has this type of personality type, this one does. And he said, well, what we need to do, he talked to his HR person, so we need to do is mix our personalities so we have drivers and C's is a compliance by the book people, so that we're not always held up. We're also not giving work that we're going back on work orders.
Right.
And so that worked out real well for them. And they now use my DISC test on anyone they hire, so they know where to put the company.
Yeah. So well, and I know you've also shared an example where I guess one of your companies had a lady that, they loved her. She was great. Everybody loved her, but she was in this job and they couldn't figure out what was wrong and why, she just didn't seem to perform like they knew she would and thought she would and she could. And it was because they basically kind of had her in the wrong, or they had tried to put a square peg in a round hole, weren't they?
Absolutely. And once they learned the personality type she was, they said she is a better fit over here, because they loved her in the company. She fit the company. She just wasn't successful in the position she was in. They moved her to a different position, and she's a giant success. And it's just because now they knew where her strengths were and also where her weaknesses were. So they don't want to force her to be doing things that are not to her strengths. And this goes even for families. I do a lot of organizations like that. They love to hear about the different personalities. And it's funny because you get in a group, and I did a church group, I guess, about 2 months ago. And they were in there going, oh, you're a D, oh, you're a C. I knew you were an I. And it was really kind of fun. People have a lot of fun with it, but then it helps them get along with other people.
Right. Well, because you begin to understand that somebody's not doing that to irritate you. They're really not. People don't wake up in the morning and go, oh, let me see how I can irritate J. Stephen today, or let me see how I can irritate my kids. Let me see how I can irritate my wife or my brother or my parents. The fact of the matter is we all have a different personality, behavior, and a learning style. And it's learning what those things are. And then, like you say, once you understand what you do, then you understand how other people behave by studying these things, these different DISC temperaments and personalities, you can go, oh, well, no wonder Joan acts like that. No wonder Freddie did that the other day. And I said so-and-so, and Jeanette got all excited or all upset. And, well, it's because they just learn and hear something differently.
You know what happens, Liz? People tend to think other people see things the way they do. And I don't mean to agree with them.
Right.
That's a different question. I mean, a great example is your eyes are fine and this person is colorblind. You just kind of assume everybody sees how you see.
Yeah.
But that person sees completely different than you do. And so you have to kind of get out of your head and say, okay, I see that they're different than I, and here's how they see things. And it really makes for amenable personality. You can work together.
Much smoother.
They're seeing different. They're not, like you said, they're not trying to antagonize you. They just don't see it that way.
Yeah, they just don't get it, or they don't respond and think and process information in the same way. And so and it's interesting because obviously in a lot of marriages, opposites attract, or we're drawn to people that are, that have different strengths than we have, and that's why we love them, but that's also why we hate them.
But there's a great example. I'll just give you one little key here. A great example is you have a C and an S. I'm just going to give you one little bit. C and an S move at 45 miles an hour. Those are two different personality types. A D and an I move at 100. So now let's say you have a couple who are married, and one is a I and one is a C. The I is constantly saying, why are you taking so long? What is it? They're seeing it through their eyes. The C, they move at 45 miles an hour. They don't move at 100. Once you know your partner is a C, you get over the, come on, let's speed it up. They're never going to speed it up. That's not their personality. You'll say, she's a C, I got to give her more time to do this because I understand she doesn't move. And that doesn't mean she's wrong. It just means she's 45 and you're 100.
Right.
Sometimes you're too fast. Sometimes she's too slow. Doesn't mean that. It just means you're different. And that's, once you know that.
Yeah, you can make adjustments. Yeah.
Sure, you can say, I got it. I understand. She'll never be like me, so I'll stop saying, will you please move faster? That's never going to happen. So instead, you adjust you to say, we need to do a little more time for her because I know she's going to take longer to get where I am because I just blow through it.
Right.
Things.
Yeah, for sure.
Those are things I think about usually.
Yeah, so I love it. So, so those are things. So if you need a speaker, J. Stephen obviously would be a great person to have and come to talk to your company, to your women's group, to your men's group, to a mixed group, like you say, if it's a cooking class or any kind of self-improvement kind of thing where people want to learn something new. There's some great opportunities there with him, with his ingredients talk, with his DISC talks. And so keep that in mind. So it's sadler.media. That's SADLER.MEDIA. That's sadler.media. All of his materials are there. His opportunity to book him to speak is there. I'm sure to contact him. Because that's the same. That's probably the best way to contact you too. Because probably is there an email or a contact form there so they can fill that out. That'll be great. Well, we're really here. We're out of time, but let's just do a quick thing too on the Happy Veggies Healthy Eating. So that's a series of 8 books. It basically is little small books. They're 6.5 by 6.5, and they come in a little package, a travel package. So they're actually 8 books now, I guess. So they're 8 books, children's books that are full color. And there's 8 coloring books and a little package of colors in this travel box that J. Stephen has created. And you can find that and see that on his websites. But if you've got kids or grandkids, that's a great gift. It's especially a great gift for Christmas and traveling this summer. I mean, summer's not over. Everybody's going to be doing their last vacation hit in the next probably 30 days before kids have to go back to school. So check that out. Go find that. Go to sadler.media or jstevensgarden.com and check out all of his books. Well, Stephen, I appreciate you coming on so much today, and can't believe this is 47 episodes, but we appreciate your time, you taking out the time to talk to our group. And then I guess if there's one thing you want to leave with the audience, what would that be? And it could be about publishing, or it could be about life in general, or even about cooking.
Well, I guess the biggest thing for me is having done so many things. I think if you're going to experience life, my dad used to have this painting of a turtle with his neck way out. And as a kid, I loved the painting because it was a turtle. But when I was older, I loved the saying because it said, "Behold the turtle, in order to move forward, he must first stick his neck out." Yeah. And so I always think about that and say, try it. Your biggest regret is going to be that what you didn't do, not what you didn't do.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Whatever you want to do, give it a try. Try it, because that's where you'll be a success. That's where you'll be the happiest.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much. We thank y'all for watching. This has been your host, Liz Lawless and Russ Johns for Author Adventure. We're here every Tuesday at 5 p.m. interviewing great people like Chef J Stephen Sadler. Last week we talked to Fran Shelton, who basically was a pastor for a lot of her life, but she has a book on grief. She's a grief counselor and a spiritual development counselor. And so go back and check those episodes out. We're here on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and you'll get to find all of these great interviews. So J Stephen, thanks so much, and we'll see you again. And this has been your show for today, episode 47, Chef J Stephen Sadler.
Happy to be here.